Thanks. I'll give you a rundown as to what happened. Brian briefly set up the stage for this. As I said, my background, I'm a research soil scientist and a hydrologist, and I study the effects of wildfires and prescribed fires on soil erosion and watershed responses, particularly floods. Brian described the setup, and there was a bunch of factors which unfortunately collided on the Schultz fire to create the perfect storm, an unfortunate perfect storm. And what really happened here was that, first of all, you had this precipitation over this high terrain, and you might have been surprised by the rain which occurred if you hadn't been around and seen it. It might have caused some flow. However, there was some other things. First of all, you had a wildfire in the Schultz area, a large one, 15,000 acres, whole basins, the whole east slope of the San Francisco peaks. Secondly, a good deal of it was high severity fire. Now what that means in terms of the soil, is the soil surface, there's a litter layer on it, and it's like a sponge. And when it rains, the water goes into that litter layer, which is the sponge, and attenuates the flow. It causes water to infiltrate. You take the sponge away, and things start happening. The secondly was you had slopes. The edge of the San Francisco peaks are steep. Now normally, with high severity fires, after you burn that sponge off, that litter layer, it creates water repellency. Now if you take a droplet of water and you put it on that soil, it could sit there for hours before it infiltrated. Now you rotate that to a slope, and as anyone who has rolled rocks down hills knows, that water is taking off. And that's exactly what it did. And the research we've been doing throughout Arizona and the Southwest and other places in the world is that you get a rainfall of, let's say, it's got a return period of 15 to 25 years, which means you might get that storm once in that time period and say, oh yeah, I saw that storm back in 1970. The problem is that the watershed response can be 5 to 1,000 times anything seen before. 5 to 1,000 times. And that's what happened here. You had a not too abnormal rainfall, but the watershed response was just totally out of bounds. It's something you never ever could see, and it's hard to imagine. The second thing which was going on here is that as you come off the steep slope of the San Francisco peaks, there's well-defined channels. It goes down into sort of what's called an upper bajada. This is an erosional surface. The streams are still confined to channels. Now you get a little bit lower slope and you sort of hit the upper edge of timberline, and the water comes off of that area, and the first thing it does is spreads out just like that. You just fan your hands out, your fingers out, and it goes off in all sorts of different directions. And that's exactly what it did. And this was very difficult to predict. But this is a normal process for that landform. And then the water went on down, crossed over 89. In some places it went straight through into the forest. Some places it spread out. And then it created a surface flow, not very deep, but 1,000 feet wide, that sort of curved around and headed to Stony Park. And that's where it compressed down to something like a 300-foot wide flow and went into Stony Park. Again, it's something that you might not see in 100 or 1,000 years. And this happened. This was the perfect storm. That's pretty much what set up the event. It was something just completely out of the ordinary, something you might not see in 1,000 years. It's like a hurricane. You can't control it. It's going to happen. There's things that we talked about later in terms of what was done in terms of the watersheds, that some things can be done to ameliorate the situation, but other things cannot be done. This is Mother Nature at her nastiest. Thank you.